So then we are back with the modern understandings on the time of the second tabernacle services are refined in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. Then Mashiyach the prophet, we find a layer of understanding of the 61st chapter related with the returning of the cities of the Mashiyach laid waste for many centuries, and the Mashiyach himself warning then his people regarding then the time not only the completion of the spring feast was taking place while he was speaking with them, but then the time where then the restoration period would be taking place, where then his own people would be in danger of being involved with the world and its system, and then not being ready for the autumn feast. So then the Mashiyach was very specific when he said regarding tabernacling. He came and he completed Leviticus 23rd chapter, only half of it. So let's try to understand these days where then the world is trying then to come up with its own system, where then in Mashiyach, known as Isaiah for some reason, then he explains, Isaiah himself or Mashiyach, regarding then the people trying to build for themselves their own way of living other than understanding tabernacling. The Mashiyach was very specific. He mentioned then his own people would be found guilty of himself because he was the only provision of salvation, though the world would be obviously involved with evil. There is only tabernacling and tabernacling only where a person then can be saved. And the prophet obviously mentioned the returning of the cities would start on the land of Cush. So then the Mashiyach would restart then the holy cities as per instructions from a person that was slain by his own people. So then let's make sure we understand, during the time of Mashiyach, when he spoke those prophecies, he was not speaking in order to make what is obvious confusion, so then the Mashiyach would return to gather the confused people. A person has to be very conscientious of tabernacling and his or her obligations before tabernacling. Is tabernacling available yet? No. The world has no way of come up with his own system in substitution for the tabernacling. No tabernacling, no salvation. So then the Mashiyach was explaining during the time of the future, his people would have to come out of the system and return and complete the second tabernacle services because the autumn feast would be starting. So then, obviously these days where the world then is trying to find itself during this transitional time from 1,000 years of the seat and then understanding the time of the dragon, where then the system of 1,000 years would no longer be used, but then the worldwide system of the trade of the end, where we read then in Revelation, would then take place. However, the world is yet clinging to those areas of the past, trying to make their own way, as the prophet then explained. They tried to build their own cisterns, and they tried to come up with their own systems, so then they would think of obtaining salvation. And the prophet never mentioned any of it related with a true understanding of salvation. So then, during this time, we then read the prophet himself warning his people of returning and completing the second tabernacle services prior of the autumn feast. There are people always trying to blame or then project evil on somebody else, always trying to make themselves more important because they have no basis of salvation. The Mashiyach said those who would be speaking on his behalf would be persecuted. And the spiritual persecution is very evident when the truth is spoken. The Mashiyach also explained that during the time of the autumn feast, the world would be caught in areas of understandings of their own. They have absolutely no fear of the future. They think they have the situation under the control. where then the Mashiyach is explaining to his people after the time of the seat would have then obviously a time of the restoration, indicating then obviously the next step, and there is the autumn feast. So then in Luke chapter 1:7, the Mashiyach explains how the world would be caught in such situation where then they would not even ponder regarding the times and the seasons and the ending of the world as per the instructions, as per then the initiation of the autumn feast. So he said, then, for they were eating and drinking and taking wives and giving them to husbands in the day that Noah went into the ark, and then the Vesuvius came. The Mashiyach is not speaking of bad situation. He's saying they were given to husbands and wives and having families. Is that bad? No, but the Mashiyach is explaining because of their lack of understanding of tabernacling. They would use what is mundane, what is normal, what is then the cares of life, and use as a means of having their own view of tabernacling, thinking then staying in the world would grant them salvation because the Mashiyach is coming for them, when he is not. The Mashiyach is only coming for the set apart when they are obedient as per the instructions. So then the Mashiyach said the authority was given to him in heaven and earth, and then his people would go around the world and form holy cities. So then when you read then in Yeshayahu measuring the land or the measuring of stick, those are the people where the Mashiyach said then later go around, measure the land, make a perimeter and build a city, because he was taking place of his father in the Holy of Holies. However, these cities are laid waste for many centuries, but they are returning. And the first holy city is found in the land of Cush. However, the Mashiyach also mentioned those who would be taken only by convenience. There are a lot of people that love to hear the understanding of the Mashiyach. They love to hear of tabernacling, but they never give themselves to it. So then the Mashiyach said, not only hearers of the word, but then doers of the word. If there are people that do like to hear the Mashiyach speaking of his own tabernacling, but then they only live by conveniences, living as chameleons, then the Mashiyach said, you're neither hot or cold. You know the truth, but then you don't speak of what is coming from the truth. They only want to hear what is convenient. As far as somebody else do the job and bear the burden because of it, then they are fine, they have their own families, they understand tabernacling. All they understand is in the land of Cush at some point, but send somebody else. And they never make themselves available as these somebody else to go over there and teach the people and uniting then those couple of sticks of Ezekiel 37. It is very easy only listening to the words of the Mashiyach, but how many people are available to do the extra work? Oh no, we got families, we got job, cares of life. This is what the Mashiyach is saying. You are neither hot or cold, so he would vomit them. As far as having the knowledge of tabernacling but not doing it, then the Mashiyach said it has no worth. So then the Mashiyach explains, and he said, and again, as it was in the days of Lot, that they were eating and drinking and buying and having trade and planting and were building. It's not bad, is it? But he explaining enlightenment of the cares of life. Those people exchanging tabernacling and not making themselves available for tabernacling with excuse of they are busy, they have families, and it's because this is what is godly. The Mashiyach is using precisely what they are thinking of their comfort zones, explaining those comfort zones does not give you then obviously your salvation. So then the Mashiyach explains further, and he said, then in the day that Lot went out of Sodom, then the Creator rained down fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them. Thus wilt be in the day of the Son when he returns. He is explaining is this, when he is returning then for the gathering of the inhabitants of the holy cities only. Those people outside of the holy cities, either they are against it, or those who were then halfway believers of the Mashiyach, they are dead. They no longer exist. But the world has created itself in such a way of their own understandings. They think the world was created in a certain way, that then the Mashiyach came in a certain way. He did what they thought he did in a certain way. He would come and save them from the troubles of this world without tabernacling. Because they think the laws of the Mashiyach and of the Creator are abolished. Thus, when Mashiyach Shaul mentioned they would create for themselves, or they would proclaim their own Savior. Then 2 Corinthians 11:4. If any person comes to you and proclaims you another Mashiyach, another gospel, another instruction, another type of Mashiyach outside of tabernacling, then be sure of it. You are in the category of these people where the Mashiyach is saying they are given to relationships and husband and having a family and building and having trade, because he's explaining during the time of the trade of the end, where then what they think is normal, having a family, building a house, and having what it takes to get a home built, and having their own fun in their own way, except tabernacling. And that's when they do not understand. So then the Mashiyach is very specific. He said those who would be speaking and making themselves available on behalf of the Mashiyach would be persecuted. And then those watching from around, they are so concerned because they are worth nothing. They have no courage of stepping up for the Mashiyach. But they'd love to hear somebody else doing, somebody else making themselves available, other people going out on their stead. And then the Mashiyach finds them neither hot or cold, so they deceive themselves. Watch our country, for instance. The new trade of the end is very near, and we are not preparing ourselves. We are not preparing ourselves as per the instructions of then Daniel. We are not coming up with USD via virtual monetary system. And then the trade of the end is coming very fast. It's already uploaded. And the Mashiyach is explaining from tabernacling, during this time of the trade of the end, the authority is given only for the freighters. And governments are going to be secondary. That's why the Mashiyach gave the authority to those freighters. Because it's a direct trade, is specific for this time of the dragon. So then let's make sure people don't get swayed by their own understandings of Bible teachings and then their own churches, because churches never worked. And then understanding the original manuscripts. People are not going to be perfect, but each person can do more and make themselves available, and then begin to teach, begin then sharing these words of the Mashiyach. But then when the crunch comes around them, then they become chameleons. Then they want to stay far away from, thinking that by staying on the fence, then the Mashiyach comes and rescues them all because it was so hard. No, they must understand tabernacling. If they are staying on the fence, it's because they have created their own Mashiyach. This is what Mashiyach Shaul mentioned in 2 Corinthians 11:4. That's why those who speak on behalf of the Mashiyach and make themselves available are always persecuted. And those then, when they observe the destruction of those speaking of the Mashiyach, then they project the evil on a person, but then when the Spirit releases, then they get caught in their own evils. That's what then Mashiyach Shaul mentioned in Romans the 8th and 7th chapters. People, they do not want to control the evil in them. They want the evil to flow through them. And then they project in somebody else. But then they don't make themselves available for the work of tabernacling. So then, let the Mashiyach then find somebody else to go over there in Africa and then teach those people of his own works and then understand tabernacling, so then it can be established on the land of Cush.